This is the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. And welcome, everybody, to this episode of Coming Home with John Allen. I am your humble host, John Allen. Before I get to my conversation with a new friend of mine, I want to make sure you people know that in the description of this episode, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're listening on another podcast platform, if you look in the description, you'll see a couple of links where you can click in and support the work that I do. Your support is much, much appreciated. I send love right back to all of you. Phillip Tyler is my guest today, and he has a resume that I can really identify with. We're gonna get into this to how Phillip and I can identify with each other's backgrounds and current lives. But Phillip is a co-founder of Demand Results Consulting. That's a self-empowerment coaching business that he has, and he is the former president of the Spokane, Washington NAACP. How you doing, Phillip?
Yes, sir. Man, I am blessed, John. I've been waiting on this conversation for some time now. I've been following your work, been inspired by it, and I'm ready to have a great conversation.
Well, right back at you, Tyler. We have a common friend who told me about you. It's got to be over a year ago now, and just, for whatever reason, it hasn't happened until now, but it's happening now. Here we are. We're having this conversation. Let me kick things off by asking you a question. If I say, in quotes, one note changed my life, can you expand on that phrase, please?
Yeah. Wow. I wrote that message in a event we had here at Gonzaga University with Dear World. And for those of your listeners who don't know what Dear World is, it's a prophetic storytelling venture that allows people to share their personal stories. So for me, one note changed me, and that one note was the suicide note left by my son Devin after he took his life by suicide in 2017. And when I say that one note changed my life, it caused me to as you would say, John, have some introspection.
Yes.
It caused me to really look at, evaluate, adjust, and grow as not only a man, a Black man, but a father, in how I was living my life. And in his death, Devin really taught this, at the time, 50-year-old man, how to be better at expressing himself. Because I had not done so as a father, as a man.
Yeah.
And I had taught my children, sadly, to do the same, suppress their emotions and hide behind a mask. And oh man, that statement just hits different, John.
It does. It does. And I want to say that I've told you this before, but I want to say it again. I'm so sorry for your loss. No parent should ever experience losing their child for any reason.
Yes, sir.
As you know, and here's part of this common background, this common thread through life that you and I share. As you know, I lost my son in 2019 to a heroin overdose. And what do you say to, because there's a lot of people out there who are very well-meaning, and they wish you the best, and they want the best for you, as they do for me in my situation. But sometimes people can say something like, "Give it time, you'll get over it."
Mm-hmm.
What's your response to? I'm sure you've heard that or something similar to it. What's your response
many times,
to that?
my brother.
Get used, or give it time, you'll get used to it, or it'll get easier. Yeah. What do you say to that?
First I say, internally, right? I give them grace. Because most people want to comfort us,
yes,
John, in our loss.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to qualify that by saying they do mean well. But I'm sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
But they don't. And what I tell them usually is, you can never truly get over a loss.
No.
Right? It creates a hole in your heart that will never heal. What I tell them is, you know, I know you mean well, and I know you mean to comfort me through this, but comfort is an action. Comfort is not simply a statement. So when
Yeah.
they say this to me, I hope that they follow up with this consistency in action.
Yes.
If they say, "Oh, well, you know, you'll get over it, give it time," I hope they're checking back with me and ensuring that, or determining if time actually did help. And what they come to realize, John, is it doesn't help.
Yeah.
It's different. It changes, but you're never over it.
You said something
You
that's,
you you
yeah,
grow through it,
yeah.
but you don't get over it.
You said something that's very similar to what I say. The loss of my son has put a hole in my heart, in my very soul, and
Mm,
time is not going to fill that hole. It's always going to be there. I think after a certain amount of time, the question becomes, how will we who have experienced the pain of that kind of a loss, how will we deal with it? How will we apply it to our lives? And will we grow from it?
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You
And
from
I would say this.
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt. I'm
No,
sorry.
please go ahead.
I would say this. But for the loss of our two wonderful sons, Phil and John aren't here today in this podcast. But for the loss of your son, I'm not following this proud, strong. And I don't mean strong strength wise, even though you are. And I'm impressed with your lifting skills. And that's a
Thank you.
connection we have as well.
Thank you.
But I mean strong mentally, strong vulnerably. I mean strong in the sense of being weak as in an acronym, WEAK, willing to express adult kindness. You are doing that by sharing out this message, your messages. That's how we get through,
Yes.
not over, through this, by sharing our stories in the hopes that it touches one person. Because touching one person can make a difference. And you've
Yeah.
done that for me in watching, listening to your videos. And I'm sure thousands of
Oh,
others
thanks, man.
who have
Thank you.
heard and said this. No, brother, I mean that. Bless you.
Thank you so much, and bless you right back. I have to give all honor for this podcast, for me doing this at all. I've got to give it to my wife. She's the one that told me when it just crushed me when I lost my son. It wasn't unexpected, sadly, but it still had the effect that it had. And she's the one that told me to use my voice, literally use my voice, get on the microphone, and put my story out there, and see who I come into contact with, and see who comes into contact with me, and see what kind of symbiosis of spirit I can start to form with other people. So this is all, I say it's all her fault. This is all her fault. But again, you really nailed it. It's about taking that type of loss, that type of negative experience, and again, after time. You can't do this the day after. This takes time, but if you can get to a point like you have and like I have, to where you can start evaluating yourself. How could you have possibly influenced your son? How could I possibly have influenced my son that would have possibly led to a different outcome? And it's not about beating yourself up, but it's really about, again, introspection, analyzing yourself and your circumstances, and then taking what you learn and putting it out there. Now, you have a lot of speaking engagements, from what I understand.
Yes, sir.
You are literally telling your story. I tell my story peripherally through my podcast, but you're telling your story literally through your own words. How has that been for you? I can imagine you have days that are rough.
Yeah, what's unique is when people say the term, John, cathartic, right? We say it's this one seminal incident.
Yeah.
Each time I tell my story and share it with an audience, it has that effect. It has that impact. And just like John, each time I tell it, someone will come up to me thereafter and thank me.
Yeah.
And they'll share a loss that they had.
Yeah.
And just the other day, I was talking to an assistant fire chief. Powerful, masculine,
Yeah.
hero.
Yeah.
who shared that he had a loss by suicide in his family, and he had never told anyone about it until he heard my story. And man, John, we just broke down. We hugged it out. We cried, and that is the power. And I'm going to use your words, and I want your listeners to hear this. We because we can't do it that next day, right? But we condition and position ourselves, and this is what you're doing through your podcast. This is what I'm trying to do through speaking engagements. We've conditioned ourselves to be able to go and share this story. We positioned ourselves in a place where others can hear our story and hoping to connect.
And it's all about, again, creating that circle of giving and taking, giving and taking. Given my story, and in return, I'm taking in other people's stories and applying those lessons wherever it fits. But let me ask you something here, because I think this is something beautiful to talk about. This idea of masculinity being this thing where you should close yourself off, be strong, don't show emotion, don't cry.
Yeah.
I won't say that that's what I was taught by any male figures in my life, but I certainly was not taught to be emotional and to share my feelings. What kind of damage do you think that lack of emotion, that lack of sharing feelings does to a person? Maybe you can apply it to yourself, but what can you say in general about masculinity?
Yeah. First, I would say this first, and this is going off again and listening to your podcast originally.
Thank you.
I would say, first of all, John, I don't believe in toxic masculinity, that term, right? I believe there's negative behaviors that we have been conditioned, but what I say, John, is it's misconstrued masculinity. Because
Misconstrued.
no one sought out to teach John and Phil to suppress their feelings. No one sought out to teach John and Phil that, pick yourself up and don't cry in public and these kind of things. It was how we were conditioned. Me by my father, who was a service member, me being in the service myself in the United States Air Force, me being working with the sheriff's office, you working with Chicago PD. It was conditioned. No one said you have to do this.
Yeah.
So I say that what it does to us is it creates this misconstrued belief set that in order to be a man, to be masculine, and you see how I'm articulating my voice here, caricature, is to somehow not show any sensitivities, emotions, weaknesses, etc. And I think what that does, it creates in us negative coping skills.
Yes.
And those come in a variety of ways. Sadly, for myself and my family, it was a suicide by my son because he didn't feel he could express what he was holding on to. For me, it's divorce. Because I didn't have the ability to express or be sensitive to the issues that were going on with my former spouse. So it does all of these things that create these negative coping skills. But again, I don't want to frame it in language of today.
I agree with
here
you.
Today and gone tomorrow. It is simply misconstrued. No one sets out to do those things.
I don't think so either. And I kind of shy away from using that term toxic masculinity as well, because a lot of people, as soon as they hear that, they've already made up their minds as to what the essence of the conversation is going to be.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But having said that, I think that, or let me ask you, what do you think it's going to take to reshape the general idea of masculinity today to where terms like toxic masculinity are no longer used, at least at the scope of its usage currently today?
Yeah. Well, it's conversations like this. It is two adult men with a background that would say they must be these hyper masculine men. Powerlifting,
you're powerlifting and police work, and you're in the Air Force, I'm U.S. Marines, and
it'll take public conversations like this that show that we can exist on a spectrum, just like Black men exist along a spectrum. So does masculinity exist along a spectrum. you remember, you and I are old enough to remember back in the 70s, brothers was wearing, platform high
Oh
heel
yeah, yeah.
shoes and mascara and we would look at that today and go, man, that brother ain't masculine. What is he
Right,
doing?
right, right,
But they were willing to express whom they truly were, right? I mean,
right.
you couldn't get down with a setup with, playing acoustic guitar. Man, if you ain't slapping the bass or really riffing, I wasn't masculine enough, right?
Right, right.
I think it is us having this conversation. It's not us being pushed and prodded along by others to say how we have to be. It is us having these vulnerable conversations with one another
Yeah.
in public spaces. And then, as we know, everything is learned from the kitchen table to the living room. If we're not having those conversations, from the boardroom to the lunchroom, if we're not having those conversations and expressing and sharing that, nothing will change. But it won't be forced upon us because our own intrinsic
Yes.
masculinity said,
Yeah.
well, I ain't gonna do something someone telling
You
me
can't
to do.
tell me.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it takes this. It takes engagement like this, John. And I think when we do this, people are listening. I tell people this all the time. You are a mentor, no matter if you're engaged in a mentor-mentee relationship, because other men, other brothers are looking at folks like John. Damn, this brother's successful. He's a musician, he's a comedian, he's a podcaster, he's a power lifter, but he can share a story that's sensitive. Okay, well, and ain't nobody beating him up about it.
And
Okay,
to me, that's just life. That's just me being who I am. But as recently as yesterday, I was talking with someone else in the entertainment business, and they, it was kind of like a getting to know them process, and they expressed that they were shocked that I'm not just a power lifter, because that's what originally caught their eye.
Okay.
And almost right away after the first or second sentence of our conversation, I started talking about, things that I also love doing, my radio program or writing.
Yes, sir.
And then they said, "Oh, you're a writer?" I said, "Yeah, I'm also a singer-songwriter." And they're like, I want to live in a world where those kind of things are not a shock.
Yes.
I want to live in a world where, and I hope that by having conversations like this, I'm hoping to create at least the knowledge that there can be a world where men have several different sides, where men express themselves without fear.
Man,
that's what I'm hoping for.
But you're doing it, right? My word for 2022 is verb, right?
Yeah.
Because it's an action. And what you are doing is action. I guarantee from that conversation, you became a force multiplier. Whomever you were speaking with went back and went, brother can move 5 plates, but I'm getting ready to set up 12 plates to have a dinner conversation with this cat because he's talking from you, right? Am I lying?
You're not lying. And as a matter of fact, another meeting with this person has been scheduled, and we're going to see what kind of collaboration we can do. I'm going to be kind of closed mouth about it, but that conversation opened their eyes to a bigger possibility than what they originally thought, because I was not afraid to show them exactly who I am, not just a part of who I am.
To your point. Conversation.
I want to see more men, more strong brothers, more weak and damaged brothers, more frightened brothers having these kind of conversations, no matter where they are in life, because you can always grow from talking with someone who is maybe a couple steps ahead of you, maybe a couple steps behind you. But if you have an open mind, you're going to gain something from that conversation regardless.
But I'm telling you, John, I've already talked to fellows in Spokane, in my community here, and said, you got to tap into this Coming Home podcast.
Oh, thank you, man.
And they were like, man, tell me about that. And I said, oh man, you got this brother who's a power lifter. Oh man, I don't power lift anymore, Phil. I said, I know you don't. It's not about that though. And see, I'm trying to have them put that box around John, then go, oh, so it's about, let me tap in. Let me see what he's talking about.
Well, here's a good example. I was invited to speak about health in front of a class of, they were maybe 15 and 16-year-olds here in Norway at a school. And they wanted me to talk about health. And they had prepared a list of questions, and they wanted to ask me the questions first, and then my lecture or seminar would be based on the questions that they asked. All the boys were asking me stuff about powerlifting and diet and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And I answered those questions, but as quickly as I could, I turned this discussion about health into something that's not just about your physical or your nutritional health or strength sports. I turned it into this.
Ooh.
Where are you mentally, emotionally, spiritually? Let's talk about self-image. Let's talk about influences and what pushes you one way or another as a young man. You see what I'm saying? That's the message that I want to get out there. And I don't fault those children for focusing only on that one thing. But I think there's a point to be made there, which is exactly what you were saying. We have to have these kind of conversations so that masculinity in all of its forms is better understood, not just by women and our daughters and sons out there, but by our brothers, other men, because some of us just haven't. You know, if you had that domineering father who told you to be tough, who told you not to express yourself, that's the way you're going to live until you are shown that there's more to it than that. Am I right?
That's right. Yeah, and you get those mentors. I call them shadow mentors. And
Yes.
to your point, even if we're not engaged in this mentor-mentee relationship, John and Phil, I'm watching what John's doing. I'm listening, and like I said, when I listen to these podcasts and I say, yes, evaluate, adjust, and grow. Man, he that is what I was doing. I didn't have the words to put to it. Now I do.
Well, that's a good point.
And you can believe that I'll be using that commentary, so long as it's not copywritten, to share my story, right? Because I had to, I had to evaluate and adjust and grow who I was, right? Yeah.
Well, the thing is, and that's a good point that you make. Everybody needs a mentor. You could be the most popular. You could be what's that guy's name? Tony Roberts.
Yeah, Tony Robbins.
Robbins. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You could be Tony Robbins, but I guarantee you, he has a mentor. He has somebody who gives him a debrief every once in a while. And none of us is tough enough. None of us should be arrogant enough to where we just stiff arm any opportunity to learn. That means you have to be open and you've got to see your lessons. They don't always have to be laid out right in front of you, but if you have an awareness for those things, you're going to pick up on the lessons to be learned. I'm going to find Phillip Tyler and get in contact with him and add him to my list of mentors. You keep talking about everything you've learned from me, but I'm also learning from you. There's a symbiosis. There's a shared history. There's a shared today that you and I have, and I think talking with you like this is this is step one of 10,000. There's thousands of other brothers out there that need to have these kind of conversations. So
yeah, for sure.
So you're out there spreading the word about me up in Spokane. Maybe I need.
Yes, sir.
Maybe I need to visit out there.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Listen, let me ask you this, and this is kind of a sidestep away from dealing with loss and whatnot and masculinity, but it's a part of your background that I'm very curious about. How did you get involved with the NAACP and rise to be the leader that you were? Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So, I'd always known my mother. When my mother and father divorced when I was a young child, my mother raised, us 4 kids, me and my 3 sisters. And my mother, she was kind of a militant. If I wouldn't have known, I would assume she was probably with the Black Panthers back in her day. I'm not certain, but she always knew about the NAACP, and she had told us about it. But, as I watched, just like we were talking about today, what I saw was they were only there when an event happened, and then they faded into non-existence when the cameras and lights went off. And I was kind of disheartened by that, as a young man growing up. And then Trayvon Martin happened.
Yeah.
And as a father, in the sheriff's office at the time, I had to have the talk.
Sure.
And John knows the talk. And my boys and my daughter said, well, Dad, we know all the deputies and the officers. They're not going to treat us like that. And I said, I understand that. But
But
what if you're in a car with some other kids and they act up and they don't see you and they don't know you? I don't want that one mistake
right,
to be a knock on my front door
yeah,
at 2 a.m. or midnight and those kind of things. And I told my mom that, and I was really disheartened and I was upset when I was talking to her,
yeah.
John. And she said, boy, my mom's a Southern belle. She said, boy, well, then stop talking about it and go be about it. And I
Oh,
said,
beautiful,
okay.
beautiful.
Okay. So I went down to the meeting. I sat in the meetings. I listened. And just so happens, the organization was going through a lot of transition with a previous leader who had purported herself to be a black female, but she wasn't a black female.
Yes.
It gained
Let's not even say her
attention.
name. I know
Yeah,
exactly,
no,
but let's not
gonna
even
do
say
it.
her
Not gonna
name.
do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so we were trying to rebuild out of there, and a lot of members were leaving. We were trying to recruit more, and I, at the time, I was just on their criminal justice committee, and I stepped up to be their vice president. And then when our president, whom was my mentor at the time, left, I then stepped in and got voted into that
Okay.
position there. And here's what's funny about that, John. My whole job in that was to rebuild the trust, the reputation of the organization,
Because
is
there
to
was some
engage,
damage. There was
because
some
there was big
damage.
damage,
Yeah.
big time damage, and to engage with those groups that we hadn't historically at the time when I took over engaged with. And what I mean by that is where I live in Spokane, it's 96% white.
Yeah.
Um, 4% minority, and
Yeah.
that's a combination,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Black, Native American, Marshallese, go on down the list.
Yeah.
And what I found was that there was this mindset that we only need to be engaged with the Black African American churches. And I said, well, but if our membership doesn't reflect that, then we're missing a demographic that we can tap into.
That's
that
right.
can really be a resource for us, But we don't want to be involved with police, even though, Phil, you're one of the good ones. Now, John, have we heard that conversation before somewhere?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Not you, but the others.
Absolutely.
And so I said, but we can't
Yeah.
have that mindset, because if we do that, then we become the very monster that we're trying to fight.
Well, isn't
And
it
so
about?
I started engaging
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
with
please.
these conversations with these different groups, and then building it and building it.
Yeah.
And we exponentially expanded the growth of the organization. Started engaging with different churches. There were a percentage of our membership, John, that were not spiritual.
Yeah.
So I said, we can't ignore them.
Right.
There
right.
were members of our organization that were Native American.
Right.
And if we're only going to engage with the African American churches, what are we saying to our Native American brothers and sisters that are there with us?
Well, what I'm
so
hearing,
I try to expand.
And what I'm hearing in all of this is that you are an advocate for gaining as many legitimate allies as possible.
Yes,
and
sir.
I think that is an important part, especially if you're a minority organization such as the NAACP, or if you're a minority person. It can get lonely if you don't look outside of your demographic, because there
Correct.
are people out there. I'll say this. A lot of people spend a lot of time telling white people to be quiet about Black American issues. I understand that, but I would rather take that energy and look for those white people who are in the majority, who are the string pullers and the ones that have the money. I want to find those people who are willing to do the work and make them
Absolutely.
an ally.
Absolutely.
And help lift my cause forward. It sounds like that's
Absolutely.
exactly what you were thinking.
Yeah. And we were at a time when we were getting attacks and harassment by racist groups. And there were some within the organization when I was leading it that didn't want to engage with our law enforcement brothers and sisters.
Right.
But they were coming to our meetings voluntarily, some in uniform, some out of uniform. And what I said to them was, wouldn't you rather have a partnership with your law enforcers who are in our space in case someone was to come there and assail or assault us? We didn't, I had a concealed permit and I carried all the time. But our membership didn't as a general principle. But wouldn't you want to have a relationship with them?
Right.
And so it was odd, but we built it out and we built it up, and that's really how I got deeply involved in it.
I that's always made me sad when we see a lot of black brothers and sisters who automatically just close off any dialogue to be had with law enforcement. And I'm the first to admit there are severe, serious problems with law enforcement and the way it's practiced. There is a serious and severe issue to be handled when it comes to the inequality of the application of law. You know, if we take it up above law enforcement and go to the judicial level, there are things that need to be fixed there. However,
absolutely,
we who are outside of the, you know, you're currently a police officer, I'm a former police officer, so me as someone who is outside of the judicial process, outside of the policing process, for me to just count all of them out and not keep my eyes open for allies, that is what, that allyship is what is going to bridge these gaps, which is going to lead to productive change.
Yeah.
To me it's simple.
And I don't practice as a law enforcement profession any longer. I'm a crime prevention education officer with Gonzaga University.
I'm sorry, I didn't know that. I thought you were still active. Okay. Sorry.
No. But to your point though, with the disparities in the system, that is accurate. But there's also disparity in the victims of gun violence.
Yes.
Perpetrated by people that look like John and Phil.
Yeah.
On other people that look like John and Phil.
Yeah.
And whom is going to respond to those things if we don't have a trusted relationship?
Exactly.
Who is willing to report those incidences if we don't develop a trusted relationship?
Exactly.
Now you often hear this commentary, John. Well, you know, we can chew gum and walk at the same time. Well, then here's a stick of bubble gum. Get to walking, right? Because we can want effective police reform, and we can still uphold good law enforcement.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you know, and again, you know, to me, it's real easy to talk about these things. To me, it's real easy to approach these things. But unfortunately, there's so many years of adversity, so many years of trauma that get in the way of people having this dialogue. What are your thoughts along those lines? What can be done to foment this necessary dialogue between the judiciary and the policing with the Black community? That's a tough question, I know.
Is so deep and layered, right?
It is.
Because
it is.
There is definitely disparities with negative law enforcement contact with non-white citizens.
Yeah.
But there's also acknowledgement that we have to make that it's not simply the first touch, as you astutely pointed out. It's the criminal justice system as a whole.
Yeah.
You know, including, John, the jury system. Now watch this, John. Have you ever known a brother or sister who got a jury summons and did whatever they could do to get out of that?
Yes.
Absolutely.
More often than not.
More often than not. Yet we cry for a jury of our peers.
Yeah.
If you are not participating in the process, how are we ever going to get that?
But
if you are not modeling it as a civic duty to do that, how are we not modeling that? Then secondly, the judicial system has to start with getting more attorneys of color, public defenders, prosecutors, getting more on the bench of color, right?
Yeah.
All the way up through, as we are seeing now, perhaps the first African American woman nominated to our highest court in the nation here. But on the lower level, you have to be. Policing is not just about the uniform; it's about you and I too.
Yeah.
If we see negative actions going on and we don't report that, be a good witness, be a good bystander.
Yeah.
Then how do you get effective engagement?
Right.
And then when those community events happen, here's what we did with the NAACP. We invite our law enforcers. And we do this to start a relationship, John, because I don't want to have to continue to invite John, Officer John, to an event. Officer John should, based on our relationship, connect and understand that maybe there's other events coming up that I will voluntarily show up to. I know if I invite you and you don't show, you're going to lose some political capital.
Right.
So more times than not, you're going to show up. What I want you to do is create a commitment, not a compliance culture, right? I want you to commit and then come and be part of that. And when you do that, it starts to change that mindset.
Well, it builds trust for one. And
Bingo. And
it widens the path of dialogue as well.
Say it. Yeah. Trust begets a conversation and some honest communication.
Yeah.
And that's how I think it starts, John. But we both have to do that, right? It is not
it's not a one-way street.
path. It's two-way.
It's
right?
two-way. Absolutely.
If they are having a book drive and it's put on by your local troopers, deputies, officers, be part of that. That doesn't mean you're running around carrying the flag and doing this. It just means they are part of your community too.
Yeah.
Because when John took the uniform off, he was still John.
That's right. Right?
Well,
it's like I always like to say, nobody has ever been harmed by dialogue.
Mm-mm.
It's you'll either come out of it ambivalent, which may be cause for one to have a little introspection if you're ambivalent after any level of dialogue, but it will cause you to either be ambivalent or take you a step closer to that other part with whom you were conversing. That's the outcome, regardless.
It is, and I love your knowledge and your history, because as I watch your podcast, right, we can go all the way back to the Federalist Papers, right?
Yeah.
James Madison, Federalist 10, where he talked about factions, and this is where we're at in a nation, and maybe globally, right? We see this geopolitical nonsense going on right now.
Yeah.
But you don't defeat factions by silencing either side.
No.
You defeat it by giving them voice, and in doing so, one or the other may realize my position may not be wholly correct, or their position may not be wholly correct.
Yeah.
And we might find just that little bit of overlap that begins to change this factionalized behavior.
Yeah. Well, again, it just boils down to dialogue. Don't be afraid of dialogue, people. That's my message. One of my messages that I want people to get out of this. Don't be afraid of dialogue, because at the worst, you're going to be ambivalent, which I hope then stimulates a little introspection, which then may bring you back to the table for dialogue. So, let me ask you something about your coaching. I'm sorry. Let me find the name. Demand Results Consulting. You're consulting.
Yes,
tell me a little bit about that. Plug away. I want you to think of this as free advertising. But in all seriousness, I would imagine that this is a big part of your identity. I would imagine this is another arm, if you will, of your reach, where you can reach out and help people and affect the world. Tell me about it.
Absolutely, yeah. So my wife and I, Meg Demand is my wife's name. We do this jointly, and what we found, and you could attest to this too. Organizations are really good with promoting from within. And we want that, right? We want to see people rise up from the ground up, right? When I was with the sheriff's office, I started as a corrections deputy, rose to the rank of sergeant, then became the first African-American lieutenant in their sheriff's office history.
Oh,
from within.
Congratulations. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I appreciate that. But what we found in these organizations is they don't do a good job setting those leaders up for success. What they say is, John was great moving widget A to location B.
Right.
And so now John can manage all 30 employees who move widget A to position B. But we didn't give John those skills, particularly those communication skills, those people skills, because as leaders go up, it's not about the task, it's about the communication, the tenor, the connection, the relationships. And so what we found is we need to build and help them build successful leaders through the skills of communications. And we do this in large and small organizations, small groups of people. And we believe it's a skill set that you can use in the office and out of the office, right? An example is we try to create an environment where people are more specific in their conversations. I use an example of myself, right? Raising teenagers. Right. I would say to my teen boys, right, when they were young, hey, Devin, go down and clean your room. And they would disappear downstairs. And 5 minutes later, they would emerge from the basement. Okay, Dad, I'm done. And, you and I probably agree with this. We trust, but we want to verify.
Right. Absolutely.
So I would walk downstairs, John, and turn the door handle, open the room door, and I was transported to Louisiana, circuit Hurricane Katrina. Right, there was stuff everywhere, but his dirty clothes were put in his dirty clothes basket.
Okay, yeah.
Because I wasn't specific enough as a parent, right? Clean your room, son. And by that, I mean, put your dirty clothes in your hamper, tie up all your Xbox cords and cables,
Yeah.
put your shoes in the closet,
Yeah.
make your bed, bring up any dirty dishes.
Yeah.
And when I started to become specific in that, when he would go down and emerge, miraculously, the room was done. And I use that analogy for work, right? If I tell John, hey, I need you to get this task accomplished, and John goes and does it, and I come back and it's not to my liking, did I set John up for success, or should I have been more specific in that communication? So that's kind of what we do in these processes, right?
I'm just thinking how much more productive any business or any office setting can be with that kind of coaching.
Oh,
the clarity of messaging from leadership to employee.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is a big issue in a lot of places.
It's huge. In anywhere you work, right?
Yeah,
Any relationship, specificity. And then we talk about, how we can change, and we don't use masculinity as an example, but you've had those bosses or supervisors that would say, do this because I said so. And if it's a man, they put the thumbs in their belt loop, pull it up like that, right? I'm just brutally honest, John. Well, what about just being honest without the brutal part? This misconstrued masculinity.
That is so well said. What about being honest without the brutality?
Yeah.
And when it's laid out that way, it should be that. Of course, everybody should be like, of course.
There it is. They get that epiphany.
Well, but unfortunately, not everybody. Some people, they dig in their heels, and that brutal honesty gets even more brutal, and maybe even a touch of dishonesty comes in because people feel insecure, and they need to cover that somehow.
That's part of the conversation too, right? Yeah. Sometimes, sometimes being a good leader is recognizing that. A good employee, whether it's a worker or a supervisor, is two sides of a coin.
Yeah.
Their aptitude, can they do the work? You hired them for their skill set. Can they do it?
Yeah.
But the other side is their attitude. And would you want a employee that every day you flip the coin, John, and get a good attitude one day, and on the next day you get a good aptitude? You want both sides of the coin where you're not having to flip it.
Yeah.
But sometimes if you realize, even if John has the aptitude to do it, if his attitude isn't good, I may have to cut ties.
Right.
That's how we deal with cancer.
Yeah. Well,
before it metastasizes, got to cut it out. And sometimes, unfortunately, we have to do that in organizations as well. Yeah. And we have those conversations as well. Yeah.
Do you find yourself that when you are in the process of coaching or consulting, and you see your client grow, but you also see yourself growing? Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. That's one of the things we say when we go into these conversations. Look, we are all adults here. And I come from the service background, even though my spouse doesn't, but you can speak to this. Steel sharpens steel. I'm going to talk about something that you may not know, but you may come back with some information that I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be sharing that. Just like I said, I'm going to come and take from what I watched, evaluate, adjust, and grow, and make that part of my communications now, right? That is that steel sharpening steel. So every time we engage in adult learning, interaction, facilitation, we each have something to learn from each other. And I think that sets the communication up, John, for more receptiveness.
Yes.
If I come in there and say, I'm the expert, I'm the pro, you don't know what you don't know, I'm going to tell you, I might shut off a group of people immediately. Or if I come in there and say, we're going to be co-facilitators in this conversation. I don't mean by that you're going to come up, stand in front of the audience and do the presentation. What I mean is we're going to be sharing out together in a group that you may have information that might help those sitting right next to you that you otherwise have a conversation with.
So watching others grow can cause the teacher to grow just as much. That's one thing I've learned.
It should.
It should. Yeah. Again, if you have that curious mind, I never go into any kind of, if I'm going to do public speaking or lecturing, whether it's for high school kids or for adults, if I'm doing fitness training for somebody, health coaching and whatnot, I'm always open. There's always something in that person's story or in the way. It could be that I grow in the sense that maybe I formulate myself a little bit more clearly, because again, like you say, we can't, when we give instructions, and if the instructions are not carried out as we thought they should, maybe it's in the messaging. So there's
There you
my
go.
opportunity to learn something about how I'm presenting my wishes.
Yes,
So
sir.
it's growth. It's all about
Evaluate,
growth.
adjust, and grow.
Evaluate, adjust, and then
I'm
grow.
telling you, that's my mantra.
I love it. I love it. Maybe I need to copyright that. You can get grandfathered in. You
I
can
think
get
that you
grandfathered.
should.
Go ahead and use it.
Okay, man, I appreciate that.
Oh man. Listen, let me ask you this. We got about 15 minutes to go. What's coming up for you? You seem like a man who's always in motion. You're a doer. Verb is your word for 2022. What's coming up for you this year? What are you looking to be? What are you looking to grow into?
Yeah, yeah. So I've got some speaking engagements as you spoke with. I'm traveling down later this month to a American Foundation for Suicide Prevention conference in Houston to learn some more about that, and then I'll travel to Chicago in April to give about a 15-minute TED Talk style talk about loss survivors, as we were talking about, sharing my story. And then I'll be in a long-term loss survivors conference in Cleveland the following month. So those are three really big things coming up. And with our consulting, we're hoping to engage with a large county organization here that has merged two different departments who historically maybe kind of did this cross paths, and we're trying to connect them here. So that's where I'm going, John, work wise, personal. I really want to get back to, as you spoke about, my physical health and my mental health. Right, I see a counselor from time to time when I'm feeling that angst or those struggles, and I wanna marry that up with my physical health as well.
Because the two are intertwined.
As you know.
The physical and mental are they're hand in hand. Hand in hand.
Hand in hand. I was a power lifter. I didn't compete in the weight class you did, just a little bit lower. But for a time there, I just lost my motivation to do it. Particularly after the loss of my son, and my mindset wasn't where I thought it should be. So getting those two back together, and obviously, you have this syndemic of the coronavirus, mental health, and depression, isolation, coming together, and so coming out of that, what that looks like, is my great challenge. And I believe that, we're going to be one of the most resilient populations ever.
Oh, absolutely.
If we can come out of this darkness,
absolutely,
with some positivity. And my hope is, John, that coming out of this, we realize that what we're doing today is one of the most important things that we can do for one another. Have that communication, and I don't mean the capacity to communicate, right? Text and email and Snapchat and all these things. I mean, either having a video call like we're doing today, or watch this. If someone texts John, and this is what I tell our class when we leave all of our classes, here's how we want you to change the dynamic of communication. Here's how we want you to change the dynamic of engagement. The next time someone texts you, pick up the phone and call them back. And then you report back to us next week what happens. And here's what happens. We get calls like this. Hey, Phil or Meg, I text back my mother called my mother back after she texted me. And instantly she said, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" and I said to them, "I'm okay. I just wanted you to know how important you were to me. And I wanted to call you and let you," man. And people just get this prophetic change, because if I take the time to pause and call you back and say, "John, you're important enough." You don't say those words, but it's important enough for me to call and let you know that I've got your text.
But there's nothing wrong with saying those. But there's nothing wrong with saying those
nothing
words too.
Hey, absolutely, you are absolutely right. You are absolutely right, my friend. And and people just are amazed at the change that occurs.
I guess I've never thought of it, but I'll pick up the phone and call people. Norway has some cultural things that are quite different from the way we're used to doing things in the U.S. It's a little bit more distant. It's a little bit more respecting of the personal space. So when I do things like what you say. If someone texts me, I'll be like, oh, I haven't spoken to him in months, and I will pick up the phone.
Yeah,
and
beautiful.
say something. Or if they post something interesting on social media, I'll pick up the phone and call that person. I don't really think of that process, but when you put it into words like that, I mean, that's just another example of stirring up the good that's floating around in the world, circulating the good, and spreading it around a little bit.
And I guarantee you, John, you were their mentor, because they probably did the same thing the next time they.
Well, it's
let me call Phil.
Yeah, it's contagious.
And so
it's
again,
contagious.
Speaking to how we change this misconstrued masculinity, that might be one of them. Hey, brother, I saw your text, man.
Right.
What's good? How are you?
Right.
Oh no, I'm good. Though I just wanted to know. Cool. I just want to hear your voice, brother.
I just called
sure
the guy that I've known longest since I've been here in Norway. I've known him for 21 years now. 20 years now, almost from the first day I started working here in Norway, and we developed into good friends. He's godfather to my children. He's written in our will, if something happens to me and my wife, he's going to take care of our children. And it's been a while since I actually spoke to him. I picked up the phone about 15, 20 minutes before we did this episode and called him up, and me being the country American that I am, I told him I loved him. And he being the Norwegian that he is, he got real uncomfortable, but he told me in so many words that he loved me back. And I think we need to do more of that. And this isn't just for men, it's for people, it's for humanity.
No, it's humans in general.
Put more of the good out there so that you stir it up and just let it circulate a little bit. We all have our circle of friends. Let it go. Let it bleed out into our circle of friends and influences.
You started our conversation by saying we have this connection that we didn't know, but there was this innate, inherent connection. Look what you just admitted to. You were doing the very things that I was speaking about thousands of miles away.
Yeah, think about that.
That is this connection
that's
that
beautiful.
we have.
That's beautiful.
It is absolutely beautiful, and it is two people changing the way we are connecting with one another, one conversation at a time, and it can change the world. I believe that.
I think you're probably you are made. I mean, you have quite the colored past, and you've done a lot of different things as far as work in the past. But with you being a consultant or a coach now, man, you're tailor-made for that, because you put so much positivity out there, and you put words on the positive things that people just think about. You put words on it, which then causes people to become more aware of those good things. At least that's what it's doing for me. And if that's what you're doing now in your consulting business, you're just spreading a lot of love out there to people in the corporate world and otherwise. You're just putting the love out there, and that's what we need more of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I have two favors I want to ask of you as we close this out. I'm going to say 3 words, and I have everybody do this. All of my guests do this. I'm going to say 3 words, and then I want you to finish the sentence. Just one sentence, okay? Phillip Tyler is.
Wow. Oh, Phillip Tyler is changing the way men are being interpreted by society.
That's a hell of a sentence right there.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Do you feel that you carry a lot of responsibility with that? Phillip Tyler is changing the way men are. What did you say? The way men are perceived in society.
Yes.
Is that a heavy load to carry?
Absolutely. But my hope is, John, that every time we have a conversation such as this, you take a little bit of that burden onto yourself, so my load becomes a little bit lighter, right? Yeah. Because if Phillip Tyler is doing it, and they see John Allen Reese doing the same thing, my load is lightened.
Yes.
John goes out and speaks it into Jim. Jim takes that little bit away, and your load is lightened. And over time, we can relax our shoulders.
I'll say this,
and the burden isn't as heavy.
Well, I'll say this as well. The burden may grow with time, because as you touch more people, there's certain responsibilities, to continue the dialogue and whatnot, and that can actually add to the load. But if I can put this into a powerlifting perspective, which I do all the time when I'm counseling people, as you carry that load, what does a load do for you? When I put, however many kilos on my back and start squatting, the weight may not change, but with time, that weight will get lighter. In other words, what am I doing?
There you go.
I'm conditioning myself to be more sturdy and steady for that load, which will then make me progress and grow.
Yeah.
Which means I can tolerate an even bigger load, and so on and so forth.
Okay,
so
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
But you're not wrong in what you say, because I take that as well. Because when you share these things, yes, the load does become lighter, but with you being the well-respected and influential person that you are, and you may not even see it because you're probably stronger than you think, but that load is growing with time. The more people you touch, the more that load is going to grow. But that's not a bad thing. The more that load grows, the more the load grows, the more you can grow.
Okay. Let me challenge this with you, John. But we always need a spotter.
Absolutely. Who did I tell you?
We can't do it alone, right?
And who did I tell you is the reason why I'm even on this microphone? My wife.
Yeah, your wife. That's right.
Best spotter I've ever had.
There you go. Yeah.
And
we need that mentality that we're doing it all alone. Even the powerful powerlifter like yourself needs a spotter.
Well, and actually, in real terms, she actually is my best training partner ever. When we were living in the States, I was bodybuilding then. And she was the best training partner I had. She helped me keep the right mindset. She pushed me through training, helped me get ready for all my bodybuilding competitions. So,
see, look at that connection. My wife was a bodybuilder.
Oh, how about, see?
Yeah.
Oh, man. How much is it? I need to get a plane ticket and just get out there. Listen, let me ask.
This is, some things are destined to happen. You can't say, hey, we appreciate the connection that our mutual friend did on social media, but this is bigger than that.
I think this was
something else that was destined to happen.
I think it is bigger than that. I know it's bigger than that. Listen, real quick. We have 3 minutes left. Here's the second thing I'd like to ask of you. You are quite you're a beautiful person. You are a genuine, loving brother with good intentions. I'm sure that putting messages of positivity out there that's your life. That's nothing you even have to work for. Can you formulate some sort of message, just maybe a minute long, and put something out there that my viewers and my listeners can take with them, and it'll help get them through the next couple of days, the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months? Can you say something that they can take with them?
Yeah. Wow. Man, I would say
I asked the heavy things to be done.
Yeah, no, that is a good statement. I would say, you are. I start with this. You are enough. You are enough. And everything you do will have impact, even in the face of critics. But I leave your listeners with this. Never take critique for someone you wouldn't otherwise go to for advice. And you'll be successful. Right? When John critiques me, I would go to John for advice. I'm going to take that. But if the general person is critiquing you, not knowing you, not ever engaged with you, not ever willing to have a conversation with you, don't allow that to impact you. You are enough.
I love it. Wise words from a wise man. Listen, everybody, before I sign off here, I want you all to remember, you can go into the description of this episode, find the links where you can contribute and help lift me along on my journey. Listen, Philip, I call you friend. I call you brother. We're not done yet. Eventually, I'm going to get home to visit my people back in Ohio, and it's just a plane ticket out there to the West Coast where you are. It can be done.
Yeah.
It can be done. Man. This is the first day of the rest of our friendship and our brotherhood, Philip. I love you to death, man. I love the work that you're doing. You and I share a lot, and I'm a better man for it. Thanks for lifting me up on my journey. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to me, and thanks for the spot, brother.
Phillip Tyler, everybody.